brought to you by WikiVidi documentaries. Neanderthal, Neanderthals, or more rarely Neanderthals, were a species or subspecies of archaic humans in the genus Homo that went extinct about 40,000 years ago. Neanderthals and modern humans share 99.7% of their DNA and are hence closely related. Neanderthals left bones and stone tools in Eurasia, from Western Europe to Central and Northern Asia. Fossil evidence suggests Neanderthals evolved in Europe, separate from modern humans in Africa for more than 400,000 years. They are considered either a distinct species, Homo neanderthalensis, or more rarely as a subspecies of Homo sapiens. Hundreds of lithic assemblages were created by Neanderthals in Europe and Asia. Almost all of them are of the so-called Mousterian technocomplex, which begins c. 160,000 years ago, when the makers started making fewer hand axes, and instead started to make tools out of flakes. Compared to modern humans, Neanderthals had a lower surface-to-volume ratio, with shorter legs and a bigger body, in conformance with Bergmann's rule, as an energy loss reduction adaptation to life in a high-latitude climate. Male Neanderthals had cranial capacities averaging females, extending to enamored 1. This is notably larger than the typical of modern humans. Males stood and females tall. The Neanderthal Genome Project published papers in 2010 and 2014 stating that Neanderthals contributed to the DNA of modern humans, including most humans outside sub-Saharan Africa, as well as a few populations in sub-Saharan Africa, through interbreeding, likely between 50,000 and 60,000 years ago. Recent studies also show that some Neanderthals mated with ancestors of modern humans long before the out-of-Africa migration of present-day non-Africans, as early as 100,000 years ago. In 2016, research indicated that there were 3 distinct episodes of interbreeding between modern humans and Neanderthals. The first encounter involved the ancestors of non-African modern humans, probably soon after leaving Africa. The second, after the ancestral Melanesian group had branched off, and the third, involving the ancestors of East Asians only. Claims that Neanderthals deliberately buried their dead, and if they did, whether such burials had any symbolic meaning, are heavily contested. The debate on deliberate Neanderthal burials has been active since the 1908 discovery of the well-preserved Chapel aux Saints, one skeleton in a small hole in a cave in southwestern France. In this controversy's most recent installment, a team of French researchers re-investigated the Chapel aux Saints cave, and in January 2014 reasserted the century-old claim that the 1908 Neanderthal specimen had been deliberately buried, and this has in turn been heavily criticized. Geneticists first sequenced the entire genome of a Neanderthal in 2013 by extracting it from the phalanx bone of a 50,000-year-old Siberian Neanderthal. Name: Neanderthals are named after one of the first sites where their fossils were discovered in the 19th century, about east of Dusseldorf, Germany, in the Feldhofer Cave, located in the Dussel River's Neander Valley. Tal is an older spelling of the German word Tal, which means valley. Neanderthal 1 was known as the Neanderthal cranium, or Neanderthal skull, in anthropological literature, and the individual reconstructed on the basis of the skull was occasionally called the Neanderthal man. The binomial name Homo neanderthalensis, extending the name Neanderthal man from the individual type specimen to the entire group, was first proposed by the Anglo-Irish geologist William King in 1864, although that same year King changed his mind and thought that the Neanderthal fossil was distinct enough from humans to warrant a separate genus. Nevertheless, King's name had priority over the proposal put forward in 1866 by Ernst Haeckel, Homo stupidus. The practice of referring to the Neanderthals and a Neanderthal emerged in the popular literature of the 1920s. The German pronunciation of Neanderthaler, or Neandertaler, is in the International Phonetic Alphabet. In British English, Neanderthal is pronounced with the T, as in German, but different vowels. In layman's American English, Neanderthal is pronounced with a theta, and instead of the longer British a, although scientists typically use the T, as in German. Classification. Scientists still dispute whether Neanderthals should be classified as a distinct species Homo neanderthalensis or as Homo sapiens neanderthalensis, placing Neanderthals as a subspecies of H. sapiens. DNA researcher Svante Parbo referred to the ongoing taxonomic wars over whether Neanderthals were a separate species or subspecies as the type of debate that cannot be resolved, since there is no definition of species perfectly describing the case. During the early 20th century, the prevailing view was heavily influenced by Arthur Keith and Marcellin Boole, who wrote the first scientific description of a nearly complete Neanderthal skeleton. Senior members of their respective national paleontological institutes, and among the most eminent paleoanthropologists of their time, both men argued that the primitive traits of this skeleton meant it could not be a direct ancestor of Homo sapiens. The idea was reflected in Boole's reconstruction of the Chapel aux Saints I Neanderthal, now believed inaccurate, in which the skeleton was mounted in a crooked pose with bowed legs. During the 1930s, scholars Ernst Mayr, George Gaylord Simpson, and Theodosius Dobzhansky reinterpreted the existing fossil record and came to different conclusions. Neanderthal man was classified as Homo sapiens neanderthalensis, an early subspecies contrasted with what was now called Homo sapiens sapiens. The unbroken succession of fossil sites of both groups in Europe was considered evidence of a slow, gradual evolutionary transition from Neanderthals to modern humans. Contextual interpretations of similar excavation sites in Asia lead to the hypothesis of multi-regional origin of modern man in the 1980s. Origins. Both Neanderthals and living humans are thought to have evolved from Homo erectus. In the earliest known migration wave into Eurasia dated to 1.81 million years ago, Homo erectus left Africa most probably via the Levant and reached Georgia. Hominins had reached China by 1.7 Ma and Spain by 1.4 Ma. The discoverers of fragmented bones in Spain dated to 1.2 million years were assigned to a new species Homo antecessor, argue these are the remains of the ancestors of Neanderthals, and of the older species Homo heidelbergensis, an interpretation rejected by most anthropologists. A large number of molecular clock genetic studies place the divergence time of the Neanderthal and modern human lineages between 800,000 and 400,000 years ago. For this reason, most scholars believe Neanderthals descend via Homo heidelbergensis from another Homo erectus migration out of Africa that would have occurred in this time frame. Parts of the Homo erectus population that stayed in Africa would have evolved, perhaps through the intermediate Homo rhodesiensis, into early anatomically modern humans by 200,000 years ago or earlier. Neanderthal traits are present in Homo heidelbergensis specimens beginning between 600,000 and 350,000 years ago. Conventionally, European hominins are called Neanderthals from c. 250,000 years ago, because the quality of the fossil record greatly increases. From 130,000 years ago onwards, specimens younger than this date make up the bulk of known Neanderthal skeletons, and were the first whose anatomy was comprehensively studied. They are known as classic Neanderthals. Discovery. Neanderthal fossils were first discovered in 1829 in the Engis caves, in what is now Belgium, by Philippe Charles Schmerling, and the Gibraltar I skull in 1848 in the Forbes Quarry, Gibraltar, both prior to the type specimen discovery in a limestone quarry in the Neanderthal in Germany in August 1856. 3 years before Charles Darwin's On the Origin of Species was published. The type specimen, dubbed Neanderthal I, consisted of a skull cap, 2 femora, 3 bones of the right arm, 2 of the left arm, parts of the left ilium, fragments of a scapula, and ribs. The workers who recovered the objects originally thought them to be the remains of a cave bear. However, they eventually gave the material to amateur naturalist Johann Carl Fuhlrott, who turned the fossils over to anatomist Hermann Schaffhausen. To date, the bones of over 400 Neanderthals have been found. Timeline of research. 1829, a damaged skull of a Neanderthal child, Engis II, is discovered in Engis. 1848, a female Neanderthal skull, Gibraltar I, is found in Forbes Quarry, Gibraltar, but its importance is not recognized. 1856, limestone miners discover the Neanderthal-type specimen, Neanderthal I, in Neanderthal, Western Germany. 1864, William King is the first to recognize Neanderthal I as belonging to a separate species, for which he gives the scientific name Homo neanderthalensis. He then changed his mind and argued that Neanderthals were different enough from humans to warrant a separate genus since, to him, they were likely incapable of moral and theistic conceptions. 1880, the mandible of a Neanderthal child is discovered in a secure context in Sipka Cave, in the Austro-Hungarian Empire, associated with cultural debris, including hearths, mouse-Darian tools, and bones of extinct animals. 1886, 2 well-preserved Neanderthal skeletons are found at Spy, Belgium, making the hypothesis that Neanderthal I was only a diseased modern human difficult to sustain. 1899, sand excavation workers find hundreds of fragmentary Neanderthal remains representing dozens of individuals on a hill in Krapina, modern Croatia. 1908, a very well-preserved Neanderthal, La Chapelle aux Saints I, is found in its eponymous site in France, said by the excavators to be a burial, a claim still heatedly contested. For historical reasons it remains the most famous Neanderthal skeleton. 1912, Marcellin Boule publishes his now discredited influential study of Neanderthal skeletal morphology based on La Chapelle aux Saints I. 1953 to 1957, 10 Neanderthal skeletons are excavated in Shanidar Cave, Iraqi Kurdistan, by Ralph Solecki and colleagues. 1975, Eric Trinkau's study of Neanderthal feet strongly argues that Neanderthals walked like modern humans. 1981, the site of Bontnewid, Wales yielded an early Neanderthal tooth, the most northwestern Neanderthal remain ever. 1987, Israeli Neanderthal Kabara II is dated to 60,000 BP, thus later than the Israeli anatomically modern humans dated to 90,000 and 80,000 BP. At Kafsa and School, 1994, the site of Sidran Cave, Spain, is discovered. where the remains of 12 males and females were to be found. Mitochondrial DNA studies would show that the adult males were genetically related, but the adult females were not, suggesting female exogamy. 1997, Matthias Krings et al. Are the first to amplify Neanderthal mitochondrial DNA using a specimen from Feldhofer Grotto in the Neander Valley. 1997 to 2000, a small part of the skull of Neanderthal 1. The Neanderthal-type fossil discovered in 1856 is found in a dump of limestone mining debris near the original discovery site. 1998, the body of a c. 24,000-year-old early Upper Paleolithic child is discovered at Abrigo de Lagavelo, Portugal, and is described as presenting a mosaic of anatomically modern human and more archaic features, reminiscent of Neanderthals. 2005, the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology and associated institutions launched the Neanderthal Genome Project to sequence the Neanderthal nuclear genome. 2010 to 1–4% of the DNA of living non-African humans are found by the Max Planck Institute to likely come from Neanderthals, a result confirmed in 2012, and refined to 1.5 to 2.1% in 2014. 2013, in the midst of the 100-year-old debate over the existence of Neanderthal deliberate burials, a team of French researchers reasserted a heavily contested 1908 claim that the Chapel aux Saints one skeleton was deliberately buried. 2014, some researchers express worry that almost all theories for the Neanderthals' extinction assume that there is something modern humans had that Neanderthals did not. 2014, the most comprehensive dating ever of Neanderthal bones and tools from hundreds of sites in Europe is carried out. It suggested that European Neanderthals died out between 41,000 and 39,000 years ago, which coincides with the start of a very cold period in Europe and is no more than 5,000 years after anatomically modern Homo sapiens reached the continent. Habitat and range. Early Neanderthals lived in the last glacial period for a span of about 100,000 years. Because of the damaging effects the glacial period had on the Neanderthal sites, not much is known about early Neanderthals. Countries where their remains are known include most of Europe south of the line of glaciation, roughly along the 50th parallel north. This includes most of Western Europe, Central Europe, the Carpathians, and the Balkans, some sites in Ukraine and in Western Russia, Central and Northern Asia up to the Altai Mountains, and Western Asia from the Levant up to the Indus River. The Bontnell with Paleolithic site at Denbighshire, North Wales is the most northwestern site of Neanderthal remains, and one of the oldest remains in Britain. It is estimated that the total Neanderthal population across this habitat range numbered at around 70,000 at its peak. Neanderthal fossils have not been found to date in Africa, but there have been finds close to North Africa, both on Gibraltar and in the Levant. At some Levantine sites, Neanderthal remains date from after the same sites were vacated by modern humans. Mammal fossils of the same time period show cold-adapted animals were present alongside these Neanderthals in this region of the eastern Mediterranean. This implies Neanderthals were better adapted biologically to cold weather than modern humans and, at times, displaced them in parts of the Middle East when the climate got cold enough. However, this has been disputed recently through studies of their cranial morphology and sinuses. Some scholars have also posited that Neanderthals could have arisen in Asia, then expanded into Europe, making Neanderthals of tropical origin rather than cold adaptive. Anatomically, modern humans appear to have been the only human type in the Nile River Valley during these periods, and Neanderthals are not known to have ever lived southwest of present-day Israel. When climate change caused warmer temperatures, the Neanderthal range likewise retreated to the north, along with the cold-adapted species of mammals. Apparently these weather-induced population shifts took place before modern people secured competitive advantages over the Neanderthals, as these shifts in range took place well over 10,000 years before modern people totally replaced the Neanderthal. Despite the recent evidence of some successful interbreeding, separate developments in the human line, in other regions such as southern Africa, somewhat resembled the Eurasian Neanderthals, but these people were not Neanderthals. One such example is Rhodesian man, who existed long before any classic Eurasian Neanderthals, but had a more modern set of teeth. Some H. rhodesiensis populations appear to be on the road to modern H. sapiens sapiens. At any rate, the populations in Eurasia underwent increasing Neanderthalization over time. Some have suggested that H. rhodesiensis in general was ancestral to both modern humans and Neanderthals, and that at some point the two populations went their separate ways. But this argument presupposes that H. rhodesiensis existed around 600,000 years ago. To date, no intimate connection has been found between these similar archaic people and the Eurasian Neanderthals, at least during the same time as H. rhodesiensis seems to have lived about 600,000 years ago, long before the time of classic Neanderthals. This said, some researchers think that H. rhodesiensis may have lived much later than this period, depending on the method used to date the fossils, so this question remains open to debate. Some H. rhodesiensis features, like the large brow ridge, may have been caused by convergent evolution. It appears incorrect, based on present research and known fossil finds, to refer to any fossils outside Eurasia as true Neanderthals. They had a known range that possibly extended as far east as the Altai Mountains, but not farther to the east to south, and apparently not into Africa. At any rate, in northeast Africa, the land immediately south of the Neanderthal range was possessed by modern humans, Homo sapiens idle to a Homo sapiens, since at least 160,000 years before the present, 160,000-year-old hominid fossils at Jebel Irhoud in Morocco were previously thought to be Neanderthal. But it is now clear that they are early modern humans. Classic Neanderthal fossils have been found over a large area, from northern Germany to Israel and Mediterranean countries like Spain and Italy in the south, and from England and Portugal in the west, to Uzbekistan in the east. This area probably was not occupied all at the same time. The northern border of their range, in particular, would have contracted frequently with the onset of cold periods. On the other hand, the northern border of their range as represented by fossils may not be the real northern border of the area they occupied, since Middle Paleolithic-looking artifacts have been found even farther north, up to 60 degrees north. On the Russian plain, recent evidence has extended the Neanderthal range by about east into southern Siberia's Altai Mountains. Anatomy. Fossil: a Neanderthal male who lived c. 70,000 years ago. Neanderthal anatomy differed from modern humans in that they had a more robust build and distinctive morphological features, especially on the cranium, which gradually accumulated more derived aspects as it was described by Marcel and Boole, particularly in certain isolated geographic regions. These include shorter limb proportions, a wider, barrel-shaped rib cage, a reduced chin, and a large nose, which was much larger in both length and width, and started somewhat higher on the face than in modern humans. Evidence suggests they were much stronger than modern humans, with particularly strong arms and hands, while they were comparable in height, based on 45 long bones from at most 14 males and 7 females. Neanderthal males averaged and females tall. Samples of 26 specimens in 2010 found an average weight of for males and for females. A 2007 genetic study suggested some Neanderthals may have had red hair and blonde hair, along with a light skin tone. Gregory Cochrane and Henry Harpending, in the book The 10,000-Year Explosion, investigated whether it is accurate to depict Neanderthals as having hair patterns similar to anatomically modern humans. They concluded that, "We don't yet know for sure, but it seems likely that, as part of their adaptation to cold, Neanderthals were furry." Chimpanzees have ridges on their finger bones that stem from the way that they clutch their mother's fur as infants. Modern humans don't have these ridges, but Neanderthals do. In The Spread of Modern Humans in Europe, John F. Hofecker writes, Neanderthal sites show no evidence of tools for making tailored clothing. There are only hide scrapers, which might have been used to make blankets or ponchos. This is in contrast to Upper Paleolithic sites, which have an abundance of eyed bone needles and bone awls. Moreover, microwear analysis of Neanderthal hide scrapers shows that they were used only for the initial phases of hide preparation, and not for the more advanced phases of clothing production. A 2013 study of Neanderthal skulls suggests that their eyesight may have been better than that of modern humans, owing to larger eye sockets and larger areas of the brain devoted to vision. Neanderthals are known for their large cranial capacity, which is larger on average than that of modern humans. One study has found that Neanderthal brains were more asymmetric than other hominid brains. In 2008, a group of scientists produced a study using three-dimensional computer-assisted reconstructions of Neanderthal infants based on fossils found in Russia and Syria. It indicated that Neanderthal and modern human brains were the same size at birth, but that by adulthood, the Neanderthal brain was larger than the modern human brain. They had almost the same degree of encephalization as modern humans. Behavior. Point Bersville, France. Neanderthals made stone tools, used fire, and were hunters. The consensus on their behavior ends here. It had actually long been debated whether Neanderthals were hunters or scavengers. Most available evidence suggests they were apex predators, and fed on red deer, reindeer, ibex, wild boar, or oxen, on occasion mammoth, straight-tusked elephant and rhinoceros. However, while they were largely carnivorous, new studies suggest Neanderthals occasionally used vegetables as fallback food. In 2010, an isotope analysis of Neanderthal teeth found traces of cooked vegetable matter, and a 2014 study of Neanderthal coprolites found substantial amounts of plant matter. Dental analysis of specimens from Spy, Belgium and El Sidron, Spain in 2017 argued these Neanderthals had a wide-ranging diet, and that those from El Sidron showed no evidence of meat-eating at all and seemed to have lived on a mixture of forest moss, pine nuts and a mushroom known as split gill. The size and distribution of Neanderthal sites, along with genetic evidence, suggests Neanderthals lived in much smaller and more sparsely distributed groups than anatomically modern Homo sapiens. The bones of 12 Neanderthals were discovered at El Sidron Cave in the Atapuerca Mountains of Spain. They are believed to have been a group killed and butchered about 50,000 years ago. Analysis of the mtDNA showed that the 3 adult males belonged to the same maternal lineage, while the 3 adult females belonged to different ones. This suggests a social structure where males remained in the same social group and females married out. The bones of the L-Sidran group show signs of defleshing, suggesting that they were victims of cannibalism. The Sunsay-Serwan skeleton, discovered in 1979 at La Roche-Pierrot, France, showed a heel fracture on top of the skull, apparently caused by a deep blade wound, suggesting interpersonal violence. Jobert et al. Reported 2 176,000-year-old stalagmite ring structures, several meters wide, more than 300 meters, from the entrance within Bruniquel Cave, France. The authors claim artificial lighting would have been required as this part of the cave is beyond the reach of daylight, and that the structures had been made by early Neanderthals, the only humans in Europe at this time. Background. Early investigations concentrated on mitochondrial DNA, which, owing to strictly matrilineal inheritance and subsequent vulnerability to genetic drift, is of limited value in evaluating the possibility of interbreeding of Neanderthals with Cro-Magnon people. In 1997, geneticists were able to extract a short sequence of DNA from Neanderthal bones. The extraction of mtDNA from a second specimen was reported in 2000 and showed no sign of modern human descent from Neanderthals. In July 2006, the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology and 454 Life Sciences announced that they would sequence the Neanderthal genome over the next 2 years. This genome was expected to be roughly the size of the human genome, 3 billion base pairs, and share most of its genes. It was hoped the comparison would expand understanding of Neanderthals, as well as the evolution of humans and human brains. Svante Parbo has tested more than 70 Neanderthal specimens. The Neanderthal genome is almost the same size as the human genome, and is identical to ours to a level of 99.7%. By comparing the accurate order of the nitrogenous bases in the double nucleotide chain from mtDNA analysis estimates, the two shared a common ancestor about 500,000 years ago. An article appearing in the journal Nature has calculated they diverged about 516,000 years ago, whereas fossil records show a time of about 400,000 years ago. A 2007 study pushes the point of divergence back to around 800,000 years ago. Edward Rubin of the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory states recent genome testing of Neanderthals suggests human and Neanderthal DNA is some 99.5% to nearly 99.9% identical. Thank you for watching. Brought to you by WikiVidi Documentaries. Please like and subscribe below. Please like and subscribe below.